Welcome to the deep dive. Today, forget wading through reports. We're doing something, well, a bit different,
Yep.
something you can really dig into. We're exploring an IELTS speaking practice exam video. We've got the transcript from Band 8.5 IELTS practice speaking exam. It's from the IELTS Advantage channel.
Right. And what's really useful here, I think, isn't just if you're prepping for the test itself. It's more about um, looking closely at what makes communication effective.
Exactly.
We get to see what this candidate does well, maybe where
Yeah.
things could be tightened up a bit, and pull out insights that honestly apply way beyond any exam room.
For sure. So the video has this candidate sharing thoughts on pretty everyday topics, seasons, sports, travel, TV shows, stuff we can all connect with.
Hmm.
But the real gold, I think, is the detailed feedback from the examiner. It's like a behind-the-scenes look at what they're actually listening for.
Yeah, that breakdown is key.
Okay, so let's unpack this, starting with part one of the exam.
Right. Part one. This is where we see those initial responses, how the candidate, develops their answers. She kicks off saying her favorite season is summer,
Okay.
mentions the sun, getting vitamins. But then, interestingly, she adds a little caveat, saying she actually likes all four seasons.
Okay, so not just a simple answer.
No, exactly. It's a simple question,
Yeah.
but she doesn't just give a one-word reply. She starts to build on it immediately.
And then when asked about seasons in her country.
She expands again, describes the four seasons they have in Beirut, mentions it doesn't get too hot in summer, which is interesting,
Yeah.
and points out the mountains are nearby for a cooler escape.
Mm-hmm.
Even touches on winter activities like skiing, saying they're not just stuck inside.
It's like she's painting a little picture, isn't she? Even with these early questions, it makes the answers more engaging.
Totally.
Mm.
And even with these, relatively straightforward questions, she's weaving in details, adding context. If you think about it, in any conversation, that ability to just naturally elaborate, add a bit more color, it just makes things more interesting to listen to.
Yeah, definitely. Then she talks about tourism, mentions it peaks in summer and Christmas, mostly because of family visits, she says.
Mm-hmm. Little cultural insight there, maybe.
Could be. Then it moves on to sports. She lists some past hobbies: wakeboarding, snowboarding, horse riding.
Quite active.
Yeah, but then explains she stopped, mainly because of having kids and maybe a bit of fear about accidents.
It's interesting how personal the answers can become, right?
Hmm.
Even in what's technically a test setting. It really shows how our life experiences kind of shape how we talk about things.
It does. And she also mentions wanting to get back into hobbies and encouraging her son with gymnastics. These little asides make her seem quite relatable, I think.
Yeah, they do.
Then there's her view on watching sports. Apparently, she's not really a fan, prefers doing them herself. Oh. Which then leads back to her childhood sport, gymnastics again, which she feels was kind of foundational for her. It's like she's connecting these different points, building a bit of a narrative.
Yeah, you can see a thread forming. And if you step back, even in just these, quite short initial answers, she's showing she can understand the question, answer it, give reasons, add those personal touches. It's laying the groundwork for the longer parts, and really for any good conversation.
Later in part one, she talks travel. Regular summer trips to Greece, she mentions, makes some positive comparisons to Beirut, says she loves Europe generally.
Okay.
Also talks about looking forward to going back home to Beirut after a Christmas trip to London. So these bits, again, show her discussing experiences, sharing opinions.
Exactly. Now, the examiner's feedback on this whole first part is really insightful.
Okay, what do they say?
They definitely acknowledged her strong development of answers, good fluency overall,
Yeah.
but they also flagged that initial tendency she had to go off on tangents a bit,
Okay. Like when...
specifically when she brought up her children. And this is where it gets really interesting from a broader communication angle.
Right, because mentioning kids might feel natural in a chat, but...
Exactly. But in a structured test like IELTS, the examiner notes it could actually hurt her coherence score if it's not managed carefully.
Coherence. So basically how clearly your answers stick to the question asked.
Precisely. How well you address the question directly and stay on track. So it raises that bigger question, doesn't it? How do we keep our communication focused but still sound natural and, engaging?
Yeah, that's the tricky part.
It's a balancing act, isn't it? We all face it. How do you elaborate enough to be interesting but without losing the main point?
So what's the advice then?
Well, one way is to consciously link those anecdotes or extra details back to the main point. So for instance, instead of just dropping in the fact she has children, she could have maybe briefly explained how having them shifted her focus. if that was directly relevant to why she stopped her hobbies.
Ah, I see. Make the connection explicit for the listener, or in this case, the examiner. Okay, that makes sense. Right, let's move on then. Part 2, the long turn. This is where she had to describe a TV documentary for 2 minutes.
Yeah, the 2-minute talk. She started by setting the scene a bit, saying she enjoys watching TV at night with her husband, sees it as quality time.
Okay.
Mentions preferring Netflix for the variety, fair enough. And contrasts it with her childhood, saying she didn't watch much TV then, played outside more.
Yeah.
It kind of provides context for the documentary she chose.
And what was the documentary about?
It was one that stuck with her, apparently about longevity in a particular country.
Yeah.
But her reason for watching it was quite personal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she said she was motivated to change her lifestyle, especially her diet, after having children. It really shows how our own, personal drives shape what we choose to watch or learn about.
Absolutely. That personal link probably made it much more memorable for her, too.
I'd imagine so. She then talked about key takeaways, things like the importance of organic food, prioritizing general activity like walking over, say, intense gym sessions.
Practical stuff.
Yeah, and the impact of good ingredients. She used Italian food as an example.
Interesting. Did she give any specific examples from her own life?
She did. She shared this little anecdote about her husband questioning some of her dietary changes, like using buckwheat flour.
Uh-huh.
And she found the documentary actually provided answers about why that was beneficial, something about blood sugar levels. It's a neat example of, taking information and applying it directly.
Yeah, connecting the dots. So what was the examiner's take on part 2?
Well, it was interesting. They noted she had absolutely no problem speaking for the full 2 minutes. Fluency wasn't an issue there.
Okay, that's often a challenge.
Right.
Yeah.
But coherence came up again. They mentioned her tendency to focus quite heavily on the personal connection, her reasons for watching, her husband's health.
Rather than purely describing the documentary itself.
Exactly. So we're seeing that pattern again, aren't we? That kind of pull between sharing personal experience and fulfilling the specific task requirement.
It seems like those personal touches, while they make it engaging, need to be balanced so they don't, completely take over the main point.
That's precisely it. The examiner suggested that while mentioning the personal motivation is fine, the main part of her response really should have been a more detailed description of the documentary's content. What did it actually show? Who was featured? What were its core arguments?
Got it. Needs more focus on the what of the documentary. Okay, right. Moving on to part 3. This is where the questions get a bit more abstract, usually linked to the part 2 topic. So, TV advertising here.
Yeah. She talked about the kinds of products most advertised in her country, mentioning things like cheese, fries. Sort of reflects the local market, I guess.
And what was her opinion on whether people actually pay attention to these ads?
Her view was, yes, people do pay attention. Even if the TV is muted, she felt the visuals, the product placement, they still make an impact.
That's an interesting point about visual impact, isn't it? The power of nonverbal cues.
Definitely. It makes you think about how messages get across even without sound.
And she seemed to feel strongly about regulations for TV ads.
Very strongly, yes. She emphasized how important regulations are, especially thinking about the younger generation and those sort of subtle, maybe manipulative messages that can seep in.
Right. Brings up the whole ethical side of advertising and communication.
Yeah, it shows she's thinking about the wider influence of media. Now, the examiner's feedback on part 3 adds some more really useful points for us.
Okay, like what?
Well, the examiner felt that while her answers were developed, they could have been even stronger with more explicit reasoning, really spelling out the why behind her statements.
Ah, okay. And maybe more specific examples.
Exactly. More concrete examples would have helped. And yes, that tendency to drift off topic slightly came up again here, too.
So coherence is still the main thing.
Seems to be. But what was particularly helpful, I thought, was the examiner's suggestion for part 3 especially.
Yeah.
Consider both sides of an argument before you jump in with your personal opinion.
Oh, that's a great tip.
Isn't it? They gave an example related to the TV regulation question, suggesting she could have briefly considered, say, the advertiser's perspective versus the need to protect children, before then stating her own view, maybe as a parent.
That makes for much more thoughtful, well-rounded communication, doesn't it? Not just for tests, but for any discussion, really, looking at different angles first.
Absolutely. The examiner also advised her to just take a moment, pause, and think before launching into an answer rather than rushing.
That little pause, it seems so simple, but it can make a huge difference.
It's so powerful. It gives you that split second to organize your thoughts, structure your answer better. It's a technique that can seriously boost communication quality anywhere.
Okay, so finally, the examiner sums up her core language skills. Pronunciation, fluency and coherence, grammar, vocabulary. How did she fare there?
Pronunciation. Glowing feedback. Excellent. 100% understandable. And they made a point of saying a high score isn't about faking a specific accent.
That's so important.
It really is. It's about clarity, confidence in your own voice, focusing on being clear. They even praised her use of intonation, which adds that extra layer of meaning.
Good intonation makes a big difference.
There we
Okay,
go.
what about fluency and coherence?
Well, fluency generally good, they said,
Yeah,
but coherence, that was pinpointed as the main area needing focus.
still the main point, huh?
Yeah. The examiner used this quite relatable analogy, comparing her sometimes tangential way of speaking to a sister who tends to wander off topic in conversation.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we all know someone like that.
Right. It just highlights that in structured communication, like a test or maybe a presentation, staying on point is really crucial for your message to land effectively. The examiner suggested this could bring her coherence score down a bit.
Makes sense.
They also noticed her fluency sometimes dipped slightly towards the end of answers, maybe when she was searching for a specific word.
Okay. And the advice there?
Practical advice. If you blank on a word, don't just stop. Paraphrase. Explain what you mean using other words. It keeps the conversation flowing and shows you can still communicate, even if you have a momentary vocabulary gap.
Good tip.
Not-
Okay, grammar and vocabulary.
Grammar. Excellent again. Around 90% error-free sentences, they estimated. And the minor slip she did make didn't impede understanding at all. So really strong command there.
Wow, 90% is very high.
Very high. And similarly, her vocabulary was praised. Very high standard, using topic-specific language, idiomatic phrases. It showed a really advanced, nuanced grasp of English.
Okay, so overall, a strong speaker, great pronunciation, grammar, vocab.
Yeah.
But the key takeaway for improvement is that coherence, staying focused.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe maintaining that fluency even when searching for words.
So wrapping this up, what are the key things you, listening, can take away from this deep dive?
Well, first, I'd say remember that clear communication is way more important than having a specific accent. Focus on being understood clearly.
Definitely. Point number one.
Second, in any situation where you need to get information across clearly in an exam, sure, but also a presentation, a meeting, even an important email focused. Coherent responses are absolutely vital. Answer the question, stay relevant.
Answer the question asked, not the one you wish they'd ask.
Exactly. And finally, remember, there's a difference between fluency, just speaking smoothly, and coherence, making sure your ideas connect logically and actually address the topic.
You can be fluent but still confusing if you're all over the place.
Precisely. You can lose your listener.
So even if you feel like you're already a pretty good communicator, this shows there are always these nuances you can refine, right?
Always. And the feedback here shows how even small adjustments, like pausing to think or consciously linking your points back, can make a really big difference in how effectively your message comes across.
So here's a final thought for you to maybe mull over. These ideas about clear, focused communication, they aren't just for passing tests. Think about how they apply in your work, your studies, your everyday conversations. What specific aspect, maybe coherence, maybe developing your points more, could you focus on to enhance your own communication?
Good question to reflect on.
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today.